Well, that sounds like one of the easiest missions ever. I love The World Ends With You. It's probably one of my favorite all time JRPGs. It's better than Chrono Trigger, in my opinion. My hands are cramping. It's hard for me to hit or cross hit any of the enemies so I can increase my score. I can't do this anymore. Greetings, everybody. My name is Tommy the Game Master, and welcome to my channel. The World Ends With You, to me, is the quintessential JRPG. Chrono Trigger is great, but you can't beat The World Ends With You. Especially the DS version, which uses everything that the DS came with, including the microphone, both screens, touchscreens, and physical controls all at once. It's insane, and the fact that the combat system worked so well on the device due to how flexible and rewarding its battle system and difficulty settings were just shows how much genius went into that game. A few years later, we would get it a bit more neutered version of the game on the iOS and Android. Don't get me wrong, it's still a solid JRPG game with better graphics and even more music tracks than the DS, which I will talk about later when I get to the music in the game, which is one of the best parts. Then a few years we got the Switch version saying it's the quote unquote final remix. And well, it's kind of the weakest of the bunch. Still a good game, but I think I'm going to be repeating a lot of other YouTube reviews on this one. Great game! This is just a bit of a lousy version to get it. Anyways, let's get talking about The World Ends With You. The story starts off with an overly self-centered to the point of being almost mean-spirited, selfish emo kid named Neku, who wakes up without any memories and with a strange mission on his phone to complete missions or face erasure at the hand of the Reapers. He starts to run away as a really cool for the Nintendo DS intro with a great hip-hop song called Twister plays, a song that gets remixed no less than 3 times in this game, and no, I am not kidding, plays. Afterwards, he bumps into a girl named Shiki, and they form a pact together, and they start to take on the Reapers games. Now, players in this game can read minds of those around them, exist in something called the Underground, and must find a way to outsmart Reapers and the noise they send at them. And yeah, if it takes you more than 5 seconds to realize that Neku and every other player in this game no longer has a pulse, then you realize it about 2 hours sooner than the writers of the game thought you would. Not that it's that hard to figure out. I mean, come on, the idea of challenging the Grim Reaper to one contest or game to win the chance of getting your life back isn't a new concept. It's been parodied by both the Animaniacs and Bill and Ted, for example. What makes this new is the idea that in order to compete in the Reaper's game, each player has to forfeit something about themselves, something they wouldn't consider being able to go on without. Neku here lost his memories because, to himself, he's the only thing he cares about in the world. And yes, before you go, amnesiac teen who is a complete introvert and complete douchebag, that sounds like Squall from Final Fantasy VIII, you would be right here. There's a lot of homages to 8's story here. But unlike 8, which said love story will change someone and love is so easy you don't need any chemistry in order to achieve it, The World Ends With You actually looks at the philosophy of human relationships, why they are important not only to the individual but for society, and why they're not always easy for some people to get. Shiki comes on to Neku in a similar way as Rinoa, being upbeat and cheerful and trying to change Neku, and Neku showing that he's worse than Squall. Squall may have been a complete ass throughout Final Fantasy VIII, but he never force-choked Rinoa just to save himself. It's a good thing for Neku that the Reaper's game does have a bit of a referee that comes and stops him and gives him some advice on working together with a partner. In fact, we see this referee many times throughout the game to help Neku understand the nature of dealing with people And as someone who was a bit of an outcast in high school myself, I can understand some of the places Neku is coming from. It's not entirely healthy, but I do understand it. Yeah, from there we do learn about Neku's inner conflict, what he thinks of the world, and why he wishes to be left alone. And we do see how broken he is after he watches another players lose the game and get erased. One that tried to become friends with him and Shiki. But this all changes after that. You see why Shiki first comes off as very similar to Rinoa, happy-go-lucky and an extreme extrovert. We learn on day 6 she's really none of those things. Like Neku's, the Reapers took something from her, something that makes Neku's amnesia probably seem easy to cope with in comparison. And because of that, Shiki has been lying to herself and Neku. But by day 6, between all the trauma of the Reapers game and the fact that she's partnered up with someone who is a complete selfish asshole, Shiki breaks down. Big time. And it's at that point I realized that this game's great. I was playing it for the first time, and we get to see Neku step up and take charge of the situation and actually help her through it, and see that he is worth the second chance coming to the winner of the Reapers game. I won't spoil the rest of this video. I'll make another video with the spoilers. But basically things happen and Neku has to play through multiple rounds of the game, each with different people he has to play through. The intelligent but very hard to read Joshua, and beat a rough around the edges guy who actually has a big heart but very little impulse control. And we see Neku change throughout. It is very rewarding experience just watching him go from telling Shiki screw you when she offers to help him to telling Beat screw you because he thought he needed to ask Neku for help when Neku had long ago decided he was going to put everything on the line to help Beat with his goals. Also, each week we see the game break down. Week 1 is an organized game that you would think that this Reapers game would act like. By week 2 it gets a bit chaotic, and week 3 is more like a war zone as you see Neku and Beat just try to survive. It's a really great game story and one of the best. Good messages, just fulfilling story, just watching Neku change from being a complete brat to a good person. I can't recommend this game and its story enough. Okay, first thing I have to say about the Switch version is unless you need to record video for YouTube or something like that, don't play it docked on the TV using the motion controls. They're passable, I guess, but the hand cramps that I got and the fact that the action is slower and my accuracy and controls were uneven make me want to go play it in handheld even more using just the touchscreen. It's a blast to play it with the touchscreen, not so much with the regular controller docked. So, what is the gameplay like? Well, the Switch version is for the most part just a spruced up version of the iOS version, which does dumb down the gameplay a bit from the DS version, but basically here's how it works. Neku here can find and win pins that he can equip to himself for battle. Some allow you to heal, some blow fire, some throw projectiles and boomerangs out, and others let him physically assault the monsters called noise. To make up for the fact that only the DS and 3DS are the only consoles with 2 screens out, your partner being summoned by doing certain movements. Shiki by tapping, Joshua by swiping down, and Beat by dragging your finger around. In the Switch and mobile versions, you can power up the combos by cross-comboing the monsters, or basically making it so Neku and his partner hit the monster at the same time, which on paper is a simpler idea than watching another screen and putting the right controls there while controlling Neku on the touchpad and watching a puck get passed around, at least on paper. The problem is that the DS version you are allowed to customize Neku with any moves you would like, and it didn't matter. Your partner was on top, it mattered what touch controls you used on them. Here, who's your partner has mattered, and if you're with Shiki, you better have some projectile types, with Joshua some physical types, and with Beat something you can drag your finger around like the fire moves that you can get in order to charge those combos. And I guess if I really think about it, part of getting along with people is compromising so having a free slot or two to make an attack work for one of these guys is part of the game's theme as well, I guess. Still, that point aside, the battles are still just as chaotic, experimenting with all the badges is just as fun. Watching the badges grow and evolve like Pokemon are all equally rewarding. Only complaint is remembering which motion to use and which direction to swipe to activate which pin can be a bit confusing at times. Make sure you read the pin's instructions before equipping. And if you're worried that the way I described the game is hard, don't be. It's actually very flexible. After the first few days, the game really does ramp it up and throw some complicated stuff at you. But at the same time, it also throws things out there to help you. If you die, don't worry. Most battles you can select to run away afterwards if you lose, or change it to the easiest difficulty. You can switch difficulties at any time, but there are more rewards for playing it on higher difficulty, and if you choose to lower your level, which is an option, you can also get more pins for cash or just to power up Neku. So regardless of what kind of bind you find yourself in, it's usually pretty easy to get out of. Also, most enemy encounters are either scripted game encounters or encounters you choose to get in by pressing the skull button to scan and then tapping on one of the noises to engage. So yeah, the game's not frustrating at all. That said, going back to a single screen does make a lot of the bosses more simple and not as exciting or fun to fight against. Most are still entertaining, just not as well rounded up on the DS, with the exception of Week 3's Game Master. Screw this boss fight. In the DS version, it was simple. Defend and attack at the right time on top until she moves down, and then have Neku throw the special attack at her. In the Switch version, I have no idea how to win, how to attack. I just try to find this bright light and throw the little monster at her and hope that something connects. And outside the battle, there are still some interesting things to be done. First off, the armor and equipment, which are basically just regular clothes you find at department stores, can change their stats depending on your area and the trends at the time. Wearing clothes that are trendy will get you stat bonuses. Wearing clothes that are not might actually lower your stats. Fight a lot of battles in clothes that are not trendy, congrats, they are now trendy, and you can get that stat boost. I like the idea of this, kind of. The only thing I hated about this is they do try to complete the story missions. You have to get past Reapers who put barriers up, and you do that by fulfilling their request. Get a request to make a brand popular and expect to have to re-equip your character's entire setup with new clothes, battle for what seems like forever, and then figure out what you were wearing before to get back to where you went to after you leave the area. It's a bit of a pain, and I dislike some of those challenges. I like the rest of the Reaper's missions, where basically beat noise or find pins in that area by setting your level or your difficulty to certain specifications. But making brands popular is always a huge pain in the backside. I hope it's something we don't see in the sequel, and if we do, it's something that is made easier to do. Next, there is also an eating component, which your characters can only eat so much food in one real-world 24-hour period. But feeding them engaging in battles for digestions does end up with some rather large and permanent stat boosts. The reason why there is only so much you can use in the day comes due to the World Ends With You theme. Again, go outside and try to interact and understand people better. As far as the game's length, it's relatively short. It only makes maybe a few hours longer than a game of Chrono Trigger, so it's really only around 20 hours. That is, if you don't do all the post-game stuff. After beating the game, you unlock a parallel mission world where Neku has never been that emo and never died, but this world runs like a Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Beyblade anime. You know, one of those animes where your whole social standing, the job you have, the person you're allowed to marry, even if you're allowed to procreate, all depends on your skill at a kid's collectible game. This time it's called Tin Pin Slammers, and outside of playing with the motion controls, making an incredibly crappy experience, it's rather fun, again, if you play it on the touchscreen. Each pin has some unique moves you can use to stun other pins, and then throw them around the arena. It's not the best minigame ever, but it's more than serviceable and kind of fun. Just, again, don't play it with the motion controls. Extremely frustrating to play with the motion controls. If it appears I suck at this because of the motion controls, again, that's why. Anyways, besides the little side quest that will allow you to unlock the strong Bahamut pin, this setup lets you travel Shibuya Reaper free and collect any power up or shop anywhere, which is extremely useful. There is also an optional hard as hell boss fight that is completely optional if you can get to the top of Pork City, in which case I hope you leveled up and used one or more set of pins, because you're going to need something from each brand of pins in order to get to the top. I've only done it once on the DS version. Oh yeah, you can also replay the game on a New Game Plus and skip to any chapter you want to look around at. And there are side missions to collect hidden reports and letters between two characters called the producers and the composers, which do have an impact on Neku's quest and things that were going on in the background. Also, going back and doing some of the side quests can unlock new scenes and new perspectives. This really does double or even triples the amount of gameplay time. So if you found your first run through satisfying, go back and look at some of these extra missions. You'll be glad that you did. I guess I should mention that the Switch version does also have one more unlockable scenario that is tied into it with the upcoming Neo The World's End With You. On day 7 of each week, look for these Blue Reapers, and that does mean sidetracking from your route to the battle with the Game Masters in order to fight them. Fight all 3 of them, and when you beat the game, if you haven't already, you can go into the separate day, which outside of the opening cutscene I'm not recording. Why? Because the battles here require a lot of fast pace and precise battling. 2 things you can't do with the freaking motion controls. In the end though, I really do love this game's gameplay. The Switch version isn't as good as the DS, but it's still fun. Same thing with the mobile. Either way, you're in for a good time. If you can get your hands on the DS version when it comes to the gameplay, I do recommend getting that one above the others. Anyways, let's move on to the graphics. The graphics for their time on the DS were very stylized, and to see this graphics getting a bit more of an upgrade for the second time really brings up the enjoyment of this game, in my opinion. Everything like the colors and the character models just pop, especially if you play it dock. Yes, you have to deal with the motion controls, but it's almost worth it to see the game and the cutscenes and the graphics with this great amount of color really shine compared to what they were on the DS. Yes, they're not next gen, they're just HD upgrades from the DS, but they still look really good. And the game still looks unique and even holds up today. The 2D character art mixed with some 3D effects and backgrounds really do work well for this game, and I do really think it looks great, even for today, for being a 15-year-old game. Okay, if the Final Fantasy series has some of the most wonderful music ever when it was made by Nobuo Uematsu, then I would say World Ends With You is the most energetic, hip-hop, upbeat soundtrack I've ever heard in a video game, filled with both Japanese and English songs going from slow J-pop to fast-paced, American-sounding hip-hop. The game has a lot of songs, and most of them are really good and fit the situation you're in. No character has a set theme, but more like a playlist of songs that fit their personality and what their mood's in. And this is a very unique route for a game like this. Usually expect a character to have a theme music that plays when something important happens around them that fits their personality. Here you don't quite get that. Rather, it's a song that can play anytime else, but it plays here because it fits the situation when it comes to the cutscenes. And you know something? It actually works. I should note that the Switch and mobile versions have a bigger and more diverse soundtrack than the DS, and again, it's really good. One of the best soundtracks ever, and it will get stuck in your head for quite a while after playing this. The voice acting is pretty decent too. It's DS standard, so there's not a lot of vocal clips. If you hear voiceover, it's because something important happened. Other than that, you get comic style clip bubbles for the cutscenes, so not a lot of spoken dialogue, but what there is really good. A good question is, what version should you get of this phenomenal game if you've never played it before? Personally, I would say gameplay-wise, DS version hands down. Don't get me wrong, mobile and Switch version outside of the motion controls. Oh yeah, did I ever mention playing using the Switch motion controls while docked is a frustrating feat? Anyways, outside of that crap, both mobile and Switch versions are well done and still extremely fun to play. But the game uses so much of the Nintendo DS's unique features, including both screens, simultaneously touch and button commands. It's insane. And the way the boss fights are done are just extremely fun. It can be had on eBay right now for a little over $20. It's a shame I don't have any footage to show you, but there's plenty on YouTube, so look it up. Definitely worth getting this game for $20 if you can find it and you still have a DS or 3DS. Next, I would recommend the mobile version, which runs around $18, a little cheaper than getting the DS version used. What does it play like? It plays a lot like the Switch version done when it's not docked and you use the touchscreen controls. So if you liked what you saw in this video, know that the mobile version plays a lot better than the Switch Joy-Con controls. I should also mention that the mobile version does have way better music and several remix tracks compared to the Nintendo DS, and it makes an already great soundtrack sound even more phenomenal. So while the boss fights and combat are not quite as fun, it's still a fun experience and brings some uniqueness to the table. If you don't have the DS or don't feel like hunting down a game, the mobile version is simply more than serviceable. Finally, we get to the Switch version, which is dead last by a freaking mile. Why is it dead last? Are the motion controls so bad that it's not worth playing? No, that isn't my main problem with the game, exactly. Again, playing it on dock lets you use the same touchscreen controls as mobile. It's practically the same game. So if the motion controls sucked and the game was reasonably priced for a bare-bones port of a decade-and-a-half old game, I would probably be more likely to recommend it. The graphics do use better shaders and colors than the mobile version and pop out better. They gave the game a similar graphical upgrade that they gave to the original Dragon Quest games. And there is even an extra scenario that can be unlocked by doing a side quest that adds additional story content that sets up the upcoming sequel. So why do I dislike this version so much? It's the price. If you try to buy this one on the eShop, Square Enix wants $50. Just for a refresh. For the mobile game version, it's $18. For Switch, it's almost 3 times that amount at $50. For just a little bit better shading, crappy motion controls, and a brief story day that takes about 1 to 2 hours to complete. Not worth the money. If you can find the Switch version physically between $25 to $30, it's worth picking up. But at $50, no way in hell am I saying that's a good use of your money. Not when the mobile version is just so much cheaper. Well, thank you for watching this video. Regardless of which version you decide to play, you're getting a great RPG. Just like the other versions offer a little more value than the Switch version. Remember to like the video. If you have anything you'd like to say, feel free to comment down below. And please share it with your friends if you found it enjoyable.
Like this.